Welcome back to Close Up. Presidential hopeful Republican Rand Paul has been critical of government intrusion into Americans' private lives, as well as what he views as violations of the Constitution. And he includes the recent executive action by President Obama to expand gun background checks among them. WMUR's Sean McDonald sat down with Senator Paul this past week to get his take.
And we are here with Senator Rand Paul. First of all, I want to say thank you for being here. I know it's a very busy time on the campaign for you.
Glad to be with you.
Let's talk about some of the big issues of the week, if we could. President Obama, first of all, talking about taking an executive action to expand background checks. What do you make of the announcement, and is this the right thing to do?
Well, if he were here today, I'd try to familiarize him with something we call the Constitution. The Constitution says laws are supposed to be written by Congress, not the President. So I think he's acting unconstitutionally, and when I'm back in Washington, I'll do everything I can to stop him. In fact, I have legislation that will defund this executive order and say that no money will be provided for it. And it's not the way our government was intended to be run. It was supposed to be run where Congress, which is close to the people and elected every 2 years, is supposed to write the laws. The legislature writes the laws, not the president.
It seems like we've heard about so many mass shootings out there. The president talked about a few of those. What would you do as president to curb some of this violence? What can be done?
I think we're all frustrated by it. You know, I have kids, and I can't imagine dropping them off at school and them being shot at school. So I think we're all emotionally affected by it and would like to find answers. I think gun control, though, really hasn't worked to stop them. In many of these cases, the guns have been bought legally and with background checks. California has the most strict gun control laws in the whole country, and yet those guns were bought legally, and still the shootings happen. One thing that's common to the shootings is it tends to be, most of the mass shootings have been teenage, white, male, mentally troubled, and then they tend to go to places that are defenseless. One thing we could do is try to ensure that schools are defended and make an announcement to the country that if you're coming into a school, it will be defended. That means allowing concealed carry in school for teachers and administrators when available and possible, having armed security guards. But one of the things that protects people's houses is people put up signs saying security, you know, alarm. So when people see something like that, they tend not to go there. And the one thing that hasn't happened, we haven't seen any mass killing at police stations or sheriff stations, because they know they'll be opposed if they try to shoot anyone there.
Is there a worry, though, if you bring guns into a school that you could create more violence that way?
Well, only if you think the teachers are going to be shooting each other. I'm not talking about having the students be armed. I'm talking about the teachers being armed. And when possible, if we've got the money, armed security guards. We already have that in some schools. I mean, a lot of high schools across the country have an armed policeman in there, unfortunately. But I think having an awareness to people who want to perpetrate crime that they're going to oppose, it does act as a deterrent.
Do you think, as part of the solution, it would be more background checks, expanded background checks, I should say?
We already have background checks. If you want to go buy a gun, you get a background check. 95% of the guns, maybe 98% of the guns are bought that way. There's no real evidence that they're unregistered guns that are committing these acts. The acts, most of them, the mass shootings, have been done with legally purchased guns that had background checks. Most criminal affairs, though, are actually done through illegal purchase of guns. So people think, well, we'll just have more gun control and we won't have any more crime. Well, criminals don't really care too much about fines. And if it's a suicide bomber, a lot of times they're not going to be committing any more crimes. They don't care too much about the penalty. And a lot of times suicide bombers, it's their first attempt to do something, because the background check doesn't work for them either. I'm not saying it's not a problem. I'm just saying there's not an easy solution, and that we shouldn't easily give up our Second Amendment. And by all means, we shouldn't let President Obama do something that's unconstitutional. And I think it is. It's illegal and unconstitutional what he's trying to do.
Let's talk a little bit about the campaign. We're in the final weeks of this before Iowa and New Hampshire. You've lagged in some of the polls out there. Donald Trump has done very well in these polls. How do you stand out in this crowd? How do you make up ground in these last weeks?
You know, I think I'm the only fiscal conservative in the race. I'm the only one that's willing to balance the budget by holding the line on spending, on all spending. Many people on the right say, oh, we got to dramatically increase military spending, but that bankrupts us just as much as those on the left who want to increase welfare spending. In fact, the real problem in Washington is the right wants military spending, the left wants welfare spending, and they get together and we spend more on everything, and the taxpayer's stuck with the bill. I've introduced 3 individual budgets that balance the budget within 5 years. a lot of Republicans give lip service. They say, well, I'm for a balanced budget amendment. They'll vote for a balanced budget amendment, but then when you actually give them a budget that balances, they won't actually vote for it. So I think I am the fiscal conservative in the race. I'm also somebody who believes in privacy, that the government shouldn't be collecting your records. And I think I also stand out because I'm just not eager to get involved in another war in the Middle East. I just don't think that there is an end to the war in the Middle East, and I'm not willing to send our young men and women back over there.
Do you think, are you worried that some of the supporters of Donald Trump out there are making a statement against sitting politicians, against Congress? You've heard this before. You are a senator. Are you worry that that's going to impact?
I have a lot of complaints about the way Washington works also. That's why I ran for office, because I was upset with Republicans not doing their job. I'm upset that Republicans sided with President Obama and raised the debt ceiling. I'm upset that Republicans put a $1.1 trillion spending bill, 2,000 pages long, and no one read it. I'm just as upset as anyone else. The difference between myself and Trump is that I am a committed conservative, a constitutionalist, and I think he is a narcissist who has no real philosophy other than believe in me and give me power and I'll make things better. I think we'll be alarmed if people succumb to that. I also think voters are smarter than that, and I think eventually, when push comes to shove and people vote, I think we're going to find out that, you know what, the polls have been wildly inaccurate.
We'll find out, I guess, on the 9th. Speaking of which, how important is the New Hampshire primary to your campaign?
You know, very important. We've spent a lot of time up here. We've done a lot of town halls. We, talked to individual voters on the street. We've really worked it hard up here. We have a lot of volunteers in Manchester making phone calls for us. We actually have the largest leadership list of anybody running for president in New Hampshire. We have over 500 people on our leadership list. This is something that candidates have traditionally done, is gather their leadership together. And we have more on our leadership list than any other candidates. We think we're going to surprise people.
And one of the things that we pride ourselves in New Hampshire, you can go up to these candidates, you can talk with them. What are you hearing from the people out there about what they want changed, what they want to see in Washington?
Most of the thing that I hear from Republicans is that, you know what, we elected you guys to stand up to the president and to stand up to spending and debt, and now the spending and the debt continues, even though Republicans control the House and the Senate. So I think they want us to do more, and that's why I've been quite outspoken at saying how unhappy I am with Republicans who have gone along with the president to increase the debt.
Really quickly, let's go international here. You talked about not wanting to police too many situations. How do we defeat ISIS when so much of it is going on overseas?
The first thing we should do is quit arming them. We've been putting in arms to the allies of ISIS for years now in Syria. You still have people on both sides of the aisle, Hillary Clinton on one side and Rubio on the other, saying they want to topple Assad. The problem with toppling Assad is who would take over Syria then? I think ISIS. So I think really we have to think through the situation. Is regime change a good idea? I think regime change in the Middle East has led things to be worse. Toppling Hussein, the Iraq War, I think was a mistake. We still have chaos in Iraq. Iraq's now allied with Iran and Russia. Syria, if we topple Assad, who takes over? Probably radical Islamist. Libya, Hillary Clinton was a cheerleader for getting rid of Gaddafi, and now Libya is a failed state. A third of Libya pledges allegiance to ISIS. So I think we have to have a spirited debate, and people have to decide, do you want a candidate who is going to go in and we're going to spend the rest of our lives fighting in the Middle East to try to make the Middle East like us? Or do you want someone who would defend America, who believes in peace through strength, but isn't eager to get involved in another Middle Eastern war, and that would be that candidate.
All right, that should do it. Senator Paul, thank you very much. That does it for us.
Thanks, Sean. We'll be right back with WMUR political reporter John DeStaso. Stay tuned.